welcome on behalf of the Center for Indic Studies to this special event where we are launching this book by Rajiv Malhotra ji, and I would like to welcome Rajiv ji, but you know he is the chair of the governing board of this center, so this is kind of second home for him, and so he's not really a guest, although he is our featured speaker today. So, just for those of you who may not have had a chance to meet Rajiv ji or hear him, he was a very successful entrepreneur, business person, heading many companies, and then he had a change of heart. He quit all that, started his foundation, which is known as the Infinity Foundation. And that foundation and Rajiv ji, they have done amazing work in the last, let's say, 30 years or so. If you look at Rajiv ji's books, this is by my count the 8th, but it might be 90 as well. So 8 books, but just look at the range of the books. His first book, Invading the Sacred, it was basically a response to how Hinduism was being negatively portrayed in the academic community and in the society, in this country. And then from there to Breaking India, Breaking India, yes, that was the first version. This is, you can say, Breaking India version number 2. And then Being Different, and in fact, some of you, I remember, you were here for the launch of Being Different many years ago, 15 years ago. Then Indra's Net, Battle for Sanskrit, Sanskrit Untranslatables, and his previous book, believe it or not, was on artificial intelligence. So just look at this canvas, such a broad canvas. But no matter what his book topic is, he brings this laser-like focus. He has this amazing understanding of a subject, and then he bears down on it to produce his books. So, in the Western tradition, of course, we always have debate. In the Indic tradition, debate has 3 varieties. There is Vad, there is Jalpa, there is Vitanda. And I don't want to get into all these Sanskrit terms, but Vad, which is the best form of debate in the Indic tradition, what it does is it first understands your opponent. What the opponent is saying, you make a thorough study of it, which is known as the Purva Paksha, and then you come up with your response. So, it's not just a superficial understanding, it's a very deep understanding. So, no matter what book Rajiv ji writes, that deep understanding as a Purva Paksh, the response of which is the book. So that's the hallmark of Rajiv ji. So, unfortunately, Rajiv ji has a flight to catch, so he told me he has to be out by 1 o'clock. So I will not stand in between you and him. But the program basically is Rajiv ji will speak for about 25-30 minutes. Then we will have 2 respondents, each one for 5 minutes. Professor Uday Kant Jha from the Chartered College of Business, who is not here yet because he is in a class. He gets out of a class at 12:15. So he will be the first respondent, and then Mrityunjay Guru Majumdar will be our second respondent. So 2 5-minute responses, and then Q&A, which is what Rajiv ji actually likes the most, this discussion with you. And since most of our audience are students, I asked Rajiv ji to kind of target to them as to why this is so important, this book. By the way, this is 811 pages, but each chapter is kind of independent. So if you want to look at a particular issue, if you read that chapter, you will get a perfect understanding of that issue, and you don't have to read the book from page 1 to page 811, that's the point. So with that, let's give a big hand of applause to Rajiv ji.
namaste and thank you so much for inviting me here. It's as he said, it's a pleasure to come back. I've been involved in this center from the many years. Balram Singh, of course, was the champion who started this whole thing, brought me in, and it's always been a delight to come back. We did a lot of good things here. A lot of unique things have happened in the Center for Indian Studies, unique compared to any place in the United States or anywhere in the world. So, Balram and I were discussing maybe we're going to write a book on the history of this center from the beginning. I think it'll be a good book. Infinity Foundation would love to publish that, promote it, maybe do a conference discussing what we learned from it. What are the lessons? So anyway, I have a hard stop at 1, otherwise I'll miss my flight to California. Of course, in that case, Balram has promised he'll get me a private jet. So now this is in Balram's interest that I get out of here on time. So thanks for the quick intro on the books. This is actually book number 9. If you include Invading the Sacred, which was in 2005. So my quick story is that I'm trained as a physicist and computer scientist, specializing in artificial intelligence, not trained in the humanities. I don't think I sat in a single day of class in one of these humanities type courses ever in my life. So it makes me a perfect outsider, which of course upsets the establishment because they wonder who's this guy without having taken our courses. And I say, well, my specialty is that I didn't take your courses. So that's my calling card, that I can think fresh and analytically. I really believe that people with scientific, technical, analytical training are far better qualified to take on the humanities than those who've been trained in the humanities, because their sense of logic and argument and evidence is very shallow. It's more opinion and politics, and you get on with a peer review group and you sort of get aligned with a certain ideology this way or that way, and then it looks after your career. If you fall out of line, then your career is destroyed. It's very different than the experience one has in the corporate technology world or in the academic science world. So the way I approach these books is that I want the idea of a book each book is a different theme, different topic, different problem area, where the discourse is stuck and it needs to be unstuck. That's what the book is for. In other words, there is no discourse happening because there's one point of view which has been fixed. It is the gospel truth, and everybody is promoting that. And I feel that there's a lot of issues, and this is not robust. The logic and thinking is not robust, and so I want to break it up and generate some new thoughts. So the purpose is not that I'm right and others are wrong. That's not the purpose. And the purpose is not that I should win the argument, but we should start a discussion. So you as students, my message is you've got to get into the issues of the day that affect your life. And the purpose of the book is to equip you with what are the issues, what are the arguments and counter-arguments, so that you are well educated in joining a discussion on many topics from a position of strength, from a position of knowledge, and not sort of emotions, and not chauvinism, emotions, and anger and victimhood and all that kind of stuff, but a position of knowledge. That's what the books are designed to do. The latest one, Snakes in the Ganga, takes on an issue I have not taken on that much in the past, although the Battle for Sanskrit also talked about how the Sanskrit tradition has been secularized, the spiritual dimension, the transcendence has been removed, and it's like a social sciences, Marxist kind of a view of Sanskrit by people who are very openly Marxist and very openly, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a Marxist. I have a lot of sympathy, regard, and appreciation for Marxism. But the point is, when you apply a certain kind of lens, it brings with it some premises, and those premises don't do justice to the Indian tradition. The whole idea of the spiritual domain of what Sanskrit is trying to evoke is lost. And so, as a result of that, all the sacred texts in the Sanskrit studies in the United States and Europe have been deconstructed as human rights problems, social justice problems, gender problems, minority problems, Dalit problem. So while those problems exist, that is not all there is. But that is what the dominant discourse focuses on. So you have, and I'm talking about the academic discourse. So that's the issue that I'm bringing further in this book. You could also say that this book is a continuous, what was written in the artificial intelligence book, because I talked about big data and how big data is feeding the machine learning and artificial intelligence, and how people are being dumbed down and machines getting smarter. So you are on autopilot, letting Google just run your life, letting social media tell you what the truth is. So you're not thinking for yourself. Your own faculties are not that great. Attention span is going down. So this I've called the moronization of the masses, turning the masses into dumbed down morons. And this book here takes this further. Basically that certain theories of political correctness, certain theories of social justice have come into being in a very big way. There is a lot of merit. I support a lot of these things that have come out. But there is also, they've been taken to extreme conclusions. And so the book discusses how caste has been turned into a form of racism, defined in the form of racism, and there is little appreciation for Varna Jati as the precursors that were more complex. They also had issues, but so does every civilization from its very beginning have issues. So it's not a problem that there are issues. There is no such thing as a perfect civilization, at least as of now. The problem is not that there are issues, but the problem is that the complexity, fluidity, multidimensional understandings of Jati Varna are lost in this new reductionist collapse into caste. And then this caste as a form of social injustice is then projected back and considered to be the very architecture of the whole Vedic traditions. And then there is this call for dismantling Hinduism and things like that, which are all over the place now. And many of you have probably heard about these movements. And then this part one of the book is a deconstruction of this whole theory. And this theory that is bringing a bonhomie between the Dalits and the blacks, a movement called the Afro-Dalit movement, that the Dalits are the blacks of India and the non-Dalits are the whites of India, and the Western idea of supremacy and oppression applies in exactly the same way in India. It's actually a different kind of prejudice in India. There are prejudices, there are many diseases in a human being, but they are not all the same. It's not that there aren't other diseases, but they're different. Similarly, in society there are many problems, but the problems of another society in India, or problem in Africa, or problem in Latin America, or wherever, you cannot just replace all those problems with the American racism and say that's the way to look at it, because that's a very colonized lens. So we give a huge response to that. Chapter 6 is a separate book by itself. It's about a 100-page response on this whole stuff about Varna Jati being collapsed into caste, and then blaming caste is then projected into the ancient structures of the Indian tradition, and then there is a call to action to dismantle all that, which I think is very extreme. With moderation, it's fine. We should all talk about this. I have no problem. I talk about this also. Then part 2 of the book is how Harvard has become an epicenter for these things, and how Indian billionaires are funding a lot of it. And the study in part 2 is to see whether there is balance in the discourse. I mean, there is nothing wrong in those discourse. They have every right to fund what they want to, and the center has a right to promote whatever ideology it wants to, bring the speakers it wants. But in the spirit of balance, in the spirit of equal ideas being promoted from all sides, so that students have an opportunity to learn multifaceted ways of thinking. In that spirit, they ought to also bring other points of view. I'm not asking that they should censor or stop the people they're bringing, who are very anti-India, actually anti-Hindu, many of them, but they should bring in their opponents. So for instance, they've had many conferences on caste and economic labor, etc., and they've never brought in Professor R. Vaidyanathan of the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore, who's written book after book over decades with lots of data, statistics, a lot of details on how caste groups, utilize their caste cohesiveness and caste networks for economic negotiation and economic advantage. So the situation on the relationship between caste and economy is quite complex. And so if you don't even bring the people who've from within the tradition written so much about it and taken a complex view, if you don't even bring those and you just promote a particular standard veneer idea, that is not doing justice to the topic. And when that happens in places like Harvard, then it propagates from there to the rest of the society. Many other universities pick it up. School curriculums are shaped. The US government policy is shaped. Harvard also is a very big force in policy making. Nothing wrong with that also. They have every right to propose policies on everything under the sun. Between Harvard and the World Economic Forum, they are trying to re-engineer the world, redesign society, redesign the world in a whole different mentality. And while they have a right to do so, I have the right to criticize it. Same way. We had a very good meeting yesterday, a discussion yesterday at Harvard University Faculty Club. And Professor Francis Clooney of Harvard, very senior person, very highly respected person, supported the book. He said it's a good idea to write this kind of criticism. Many of the things are absolutely valid. He supported them. He quoted from the book. And this secularization of a spiritual tradition leading to then social justice allegations as being sort of the character and the built-in signature of that tradition is not very fair. And he agreed with that. And where I pointed out where while the same thing has happened to the Christian tradition, he mentioned it, that secularizing and all this wokeism and stuff like that is also happening to the making allegations against other religions like his own Christian religion. The difference is that nobody's asked for dismantling the church. Just even though they had many scandals, sex scandals, they had all kinds of scandals in the church, which are well known. The church also acknowledged and apologized. Then there have been, all these allegations of slavery, age of slavery, and the role of the church, and what they did to Native Americans, and what they did to the pagans, and all these kind of things. The church has acknowledged that history, that very ugly history, and apologized for it. But nobody says, let's dismantle the church. However, evidence against the Hindu tradition, examples here and there, are being used to build a case that says dismantle Hinduism. This is very different, very extreme reaction. There are many allegations, many proven things that have been done, ugly things that have been done in the name of Islam, and structures built into Islam, and people criticize it. But they isolate the criticism to a particular person, a particular kind of thing, a particular practice. They don't go and say dismantle Islam. So why dismantle Hinduism on the basis that it's promoting social injustice? That's the kind of thing that I want to talk about. It's the extreme version. It's the extreme attack on my heritage that concerns me. So the third part of the book then looks at how all this affects India. So we talk about Ashoka University, Kriya University, the Azim Premji, and he's taken this JPAL from MIT, which is run by a couple of these Nobel laureates in economics, and they've taken that into India, and they've spread that, and they are very much involved in the politics. They're very much involved in political parties. So you have people in MIT, in this particular example, I'm just giving you this example, you have people in MIT of very high stature in terms of their reputation in the world, being Nobel Prize winners, funded by the Saudis, Jameel Poverty Action Lab. That J is the name of a Saudi sheikh. And so these are billionaires funding Saudi money into MIT to tackle social problems in India. And so why would the Saudis do that when they have enough social problems of their own? Why would they focus on India? What's the reason? And why would these esteemed scholars join in? Of course there are problems that need to be solved, but there are also solutions within the society. And not necessarily a danda from outside is necessary. And so I point this out. People in India didn't know And since this book has come out, now there's a whole thread. Today or yesterday, there's a whole thread on Twitter. Somebody has taken this idea further and shown that these people, same people, J-Pal from MIT that I've mentioned in the book, they are involved in one of the political parties to try and boost them. So they're involved in politics. So you can't say that this is all academic work. It's camouflaged as academic work, but the funding and the outcome and the political intervention are very different things. So that's part 3 deals with Tata Institute of Social Sciences. It deals with Godrej has a lab in India for doing this kind of work. The idea of these 3 parts is to first, in part 1, build a theoretical framework of what is the discourse, the new discourse, what is new about it, what's its history. And then part 2 is the discussion on how this discourse has been energized and churned and developed in Harvard. Not that Harvard is the only place doing it, but I picked on Harvard because I like to pick big targets. And if you pick a big target, then you get a response which is the strongest response you're going to get compared to taking on a minor target. And it turns out that Harvard is in fact the dominant player in developing these theses. We've shown that. The influence of Harvard then spreads elsewhere. So that's part 2. And a big surprise in part 2 is the role of Indian billionaires. We mentioned there's a chapter on Mahindra Humanities Center at Harvard. There's a separate chapter on Lakshmi Mittal South Asia Institute at Harvard. There's a separate chapter on Piramal, So these are separate chapters. You can take any one of them by itself and understand how the billionaire is playing a role in using their family name, credibility, and money to help promote a certain ideological point of view. And all we are doing is pointing it out, that this billionaire is using their name, fortune, all of that credibility, connections to promote this ideology. Now, if the billionaire says, yes, we are doing it, and what's wrong, we have no problem. They have every right to use their money however they want. But I think a lot of people in India found this very startling and surprising. I spent a whole month launching the book in India in October, and people found it very, very surprising that Indian billionaires who are very patriotic in India, very, sort of aligned with the government, aligned with the society and Indian traditions and heritage, are, when they go outside, playing a different game. So the question is, why are they playing this game? And we've given some answers in this book. I think the conclusion is makes some very far-reaching predictions of where we are going, where the world is going. In particular, how Harvard Kennedy School, aligned with the World Economic Forum, are trying to move the world in a certain direction, and how the mega billionaires in America, be it Bill Gates or the Zuckerberg or all these people, and the Jeff Bezos and all, how they are trying to move society in a certain direction. And this is where the AI has a role, AI and technology has a role, all this wokeism has a role, the new politics of this global left has a role, and India is actually at the crosshair. India is at the crosshair as a very large society, civilization that needs to be dismantled in order for this thing to move forward. And that's what the conclusion puts together. It's not like in my previous books talking about Christians, converting poor villagers. Those are also going on, but this is a very different thing, a very new thing. This is top-down, convergence is bottom-up. Convergence goes to the poor people in the villages, try to convert them. This goes at the top of society. The rich people, their kids go to very elite colleges, they are being converted, brainwashed, I would say, not religion-wise converted, but ideologically. This is going to Niti Aayog, the Planning Commission, going to the corporate people in India, the HR departments, and under the name of very nice words, nice terminology, ESG, DEI, all these kind of acronyms. What really is happening beyond, I mean, these are very nice things, I support them, but in the name of these things, many other things are being sneaked in, which we point out in this book. So that's basically what it is. And as was said, my final comment is that don't let the size scare you, because you just need to read the introduction, and then you read the one-page overview of every chapter. And that gives you an idea of the book in less than 100 pages. And you can then go deeper into any chapter. You don't have to read all of them. You don't have to read them in any sequence. Just read the ones that you feel interested in. So with that, I will stop. It's 12:31, and I think I'm on time. And we'll now turn over to the next part of the program, and thank you very much for listening.
Good afternoon. It's a very wonderful presentation, sir. And Rajiv Malhotra is walking encyclopedia and high level of intellectual currency. And I know him for the last 15, 20 years or so. And it's a wonderful book. And nice of you, congratulations. And please give him a big round of applause. Now our first presenter is Mr. Jha from Uday Jha from College of Business. He is going to come here. I want to invite him as the first presenter. Please come. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Before coming to Imar Dartmouth, I was working in the Indian Armed Forces. So I always had a problem regarding this whole caste system, and being a Brahmin, always wanted to know where did our wealth vanish. So I started my education in village, and there was no discrimination whatever I saw in the pictures, movies. But when I reached class 5th and 6th, I started reading about them. So I wanted to confront my grandfather, where our wealth? We are supposed to be rich. I'm Mathil Brahmin by caste. So where is our wealth? By that time, Great Gambler and other movies were out. So I was convinced my grandfather would have gambled everything out. I had friends which were Paswans, others. Only after moving out in my 5th and 6th class, I realized half of them are scheduled caste. So I had not experienced anything in this village which I learned later. So I want to know where did the whole thing happen. Then I realized, being a Brahmin, we are not supposed to own any property. But I must thank my grandfather that he started educating his kids, and they started moving out of village. And that's how I'm here. So when I started finding out where did the whole game started, then I found out in the British Empire, they started floating a narrative that the problem or all the ills that's happening in India is because of the Brahmins. But if you look back, the Brahmins were not by birth that everyone could go to ashram and become a Brahmin. But over a period of time, because of aggression and other things, everyone started restricting into the village. So the book actually talks about how the prominent figures whom we never knew they were scheduled caste, Ved Vyas, Valmiki, they were never considered scheduled caste. But now we know they are scheduled caste. They were celebrated like any other great authors. So over a period of time, just to target a small group, which is easy to target, the second thing happened is, during 1857, most of the revolts were started by Brahmins. Mangal Pandey was just one prominent name, but others were also Brahmins. So when the caste-based regiments came up, there was no Brahmin regiment. Not because they were not warriors. They were in 1857, they were leading the front. But they wanted to punish this. The Britishers, they punished Indians disproportionately for what happened in 1857. Just against 6,000 Britishers killed, they killed 8 lakh people in Awadh region itself. So obviously the Brahmin caste can't be spared. So now most of the regiments came up in 1869 or something. And now that regiment has become so ingrained that when Government of India wanted to change it in 1985 after killing of Brigadier Puri, they were not successful. So Britishers managed to change the mindset, not only at the top level, educated lot, even the uneducated lot, illiterates. Now government is struggling since last 75 years to change that mindset. There are regiments which are not named after, like one Rajput became Guards. So they try to change those things, but it's not been happening because that is the level by which they have reached. At one level, the government is trying to get rid of this caste system. At the other level, there are groups which are trying to enshrine that the root cause of all our problem is caste. Whereas, as the book says, I have not read the entire book, but I was focused on that caste part of it. So the book clearly says that most of the great scholars were not from the upper caste. Whether we talk about Vedyas, we talk about Valmiki, they were all, now they are termed as scheduled caste. But no one treated them like that. When Sita went on exile, Sita stayed with Valmiki. There was no outcry about it. Most of the people that I started my education in village, and most of my friends, at least 50% of them, I've only learned later, they were all scheduled caste. Paswans, the Machwara community, Mala, everything as scheduled caste. So what is being projected outside is not even prevalent in remote villages of Bihar. I did my initial education from a remote village close to Nepal border. So what is being projected in US does not even happen in remote villages in India. But that's how the projection is there. That's how the thing is communicated to everyone. And now because you are told that you are discriminated, you are downtrodden, the other person starts feeling it. The small segment of those so-called scheduled caste, they are scheduled caste. They are actually, the king of Banaras is supposed to be the lowest caste. So the entire property of Agra is owned by the scheduled caste. So they are maybe educationally backward because they have selected that profession. They were not economically backward. But the whole narrative became as if Brahmins were dominant. The book also says the number of Brahmins in teaching profession, which was supposed to be primary, were not significant enough. And this is enough example of people moving from one profession to a different profession depending on the economic conditions. So a person could change from one profession to another because that's what suits at that particular condition. So the caste was not something which was actually cast in stone, but that's how it is being projected. So this particular book I actually focused more about caste because I always felt discriminated by birth because I'm Brahmin. My forefathers didn't have property because they were not supposed to have property by the custom, and now we are faced as if we were the villains. So that is where I was trying to read that particular book, and I found that most of the prominent personalities of Hindu religion were not from Brahmins, and they were actually defenseless. Most of the people of the earliest time were actually provided defense by others because they were providing education which was supposed to be done. Okay, with this actually I finished. I'll just hand over to you. Okay. Thanks so much.
It's wonderful, sir. I won't say I don't have property. We have with us another representative, Professor Chinjay. He's PhD in physics in UK, and he's a postdoctoral fellow in Harvard with Nobel laureate, I think. So I would like to invite Professor Chinjay to come over here and give some words of wisdom. Thank you. You have begin.
Thank you for that introduction. Namaskar to everyone. It's a privilege to be here and to have been asked to be a responder. I don't think there is, a more sincere representative of a civilizational thrust to counter this shadow cultural and intellectual warfare that's going on, as Rajiv ji is. And this book is, of course, a magnum opus, to show this concerted effort to kind of undertake this process, this whole warfare of sorts. And the idea that, we have this premise, right, which is that of dharma, which has been the plinth of the civilization or the Indic civilization since times of yore. We have had disparate schools of thought, from non-dualistic Advaita Vedanta to Nyaya Vaisheshika, to even philosophical skepticism, which is seen in schools like Ajivikas and Charvaks. And we have had things where we promulgate the idea of transcending binaries, even that of existence and non-existence. What, however, is slightly different from modern frameworks such as the critical race theory, which has been the center point of the discussion around what is the opposition, is the embracing of nuance, is the embracing of pragmatism, which is very important in certain contexts and has been done in the Indic civilizational ethos. And the question, therefore, is when we talk about things like intersectionality, when we talk about things like dismantling of constructs and structures, who is the arbiter, who is the judge for deciding what is proper, what is not, who is the oppressed and who is not. And it almost seems to be that there is a political structure, there is an echo chamber of sorts, which reinforces the application of these concepts. And therefore the applicability itself is very persnickety and perfunctory, right? There isn't a consistency, so to say, and there is an accumulation of victimhood points which is more primary, so to say. So I would like to focus on two particular aspects which I found very, very important at the moment. And I'll also give an observation of sorts. So having been in the Harvard space for a while, there were these instances when I went ahead and tried to discuss about dharmic cosmopolitanism, for instance. We have had beautiful renditions of things like the unity of apperception in texts like Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and various other Vedic and Puranic texts. And the only argument against, the only counter against, was not quite on the merit of a counter-argument at all. It was on the basis of a commentary, it was on the basis of judgmentalism, and the words that were used were that the Vedas and Upanishads are tools of Brahminical supremacy. So the inconsistency and the lack of intellectual or conceptual heft is very, very self-evident, so to say. Two other points which Rajivji has mentioned, and also there are other responders from the other side, so to say, who have discussed at length, is one of merit, right? And this is particularly important given the ongoing case in the Supreme Court that is deciding, whether affirmative action should take place, what is merit, how do you decide about the burden of identity, so to say. And there are scholars like Suraj Yenge at Harvard University who talk about merit itself being conceptually something that has to be contextualized, so to say, and there is a whole gray area that comes into the picture thereof. And so my question there, it's more of a food for thought, is whether the intersectionality has been consistently applied for the dharmic fold, for the people, when we talk about religion, culture, social dynamics, economic disadvantage as well, because you would have a lot of, just as white families would be on the lower end of the economic kind of scale, the spectrum, so to say, and could be at a disadvantage. So that also needs to be in place. So the idea of merit, the idea of application of intersectionality is something that has to be thought of more deeply, is what I would put forth and has been discussed in the book as well. The other point that I wanted to mention about is to do with the monetary aspect of this cultural battle, which is very, very important. There is a corporatization of wokeism, right? And that often accentuates the radical elements. A good example would be George Soros, who has been funding a lot of woke projects with massive endowments. From 2017 to 19, the Walmart Foundation has given $5 million dollars to the New Venture Fund. It has given $4 million to FSG Inc. and various others, all left-leaning woke entities. And there has been a gradual movement in that direction over the past 2 decades. there is an interesting kind of presence of coordinated campaigns in what are known as shareholder activists. People who bring about, as Rajivji was mentioning, ESG shareholder kind of activist interventions and contributions. And this as well has played a pivotal role in this cultural battle. So the next question, the next food for thought would be, how do we go about with kind of removing these fundamental elements which are skewing the discussion in a certain manner, in a systemic way, right? It is not quite leaving the independence, leaving the space for that negotiation, for that deliberation to take place. So I will leave it at that, and I would like to thank Rajiv ji for writing this beautiful book, and for all of you for having attended and being part of this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, if you have any questions, you can ask him. You can have Rajiv Malhotra.
Can I go there?
Yeah.
Maybe you move the mic around.
Yeah.
Keep the mic.
Any questions? Yeah.
Good afternoon, Rajiv ji. So whatever I have understood today was that you have brought up a very beautiful and current topic where all of us are looking at it, but none of us are taking action. So what would be your message to the students here who would maybe tomorrow become billionaires? And I don't want them to fund the similar way. So
Perfect. So first action is get the copy of the book and read it. Not the whole thing, read the introduction, read the one-page overview of every chapter, and read the conclusion, 100 pages. You should at least do that.
yeah.
So this guy is telling me that it's time to leave, but I think we have another 10 minutes. So only after being informed can you help me, or can you join the cause. A lot of people are very emotional, but they haven't taken the trouble to get informed, and so that is counterproductive, because then they'll be all full of emotions and anger and this and that. I can't use that, and that's actually bad for our cause. So you must take the time. You must expand your attention span beyond 7 seconds, which is what they say, your attention span is 7 seconds. You have to expand it so that, slowly you read. You don't read this fast, it's not a novel. You need, so many pages a day. Over a period of 3, 4, 5 days, you read these 100 pages. I think that will be very useful. Once you've done that, or even before, any time in the middle, if you're inspired, go write a review in the Amazon. It will really help me. We need Amazon reviews because the algorithms go based on that. So we need reviews, whatever you say, even if it's 2 sentences, say it. So in other words, I'm trying to get people out of their shell and not just sit quietly and say, I'm helping, I'm aligned, but I just sit and clap and don't do anything. I'm trying to get people to actually do something. So read, write a little review. You can get involved in our social media by propagating what we are doing. If you are a social media influencer, contact us. I want to do a workshop of social media influencers, only social media influencers, and teach them how to take these ideas and turn it and include them in your own thinking. Include them in your own thinking, your own videos, and that way, in your voice and with your face, you're bringing out these kind of ideas. But refer to our book and link it to the book. So these are some of the things you can do. If you are a very good researcher on Indian thought, not somebody who's sort of amateur just starting out, because then we have to coach you. But if you are specializing in something like this and you want to become a research assistant, you can also write to me on that. So there are different ways that people can join. But most of all, if you remain involved in this, then one day when you make your $1 billion or whatever, you will realize that you have to pay back to the tradition which gave birth to your heritage. Your heritage gave birth to all this knowledge. And so that's what we are doing, is planting these seeds. And a large number of our own people have gone in their own direction and hating us. And we want to create a new wave of people who actually are appreciating the heritage that you came from. It's not about me. My swadharma is to do this yajna. you can join it because it is your Swadharma. Not helping me, but you are performing your own Swadharma by joining this yagna. That's what my plea is. Thank you.
Rajiv ji, nice presentation about your book, and it's wonderful that you have written that book. I was wondering, how did you come up with the name of the book? One question that also Satya has. The other thing is that the Ganga is used as synonymous with India or Hinduism. Should we really be worried about all these snakes? Because India has seen a lot of invasions and a lot of intrusions, and it's kind of included in its own journey.
So let me answer
its
that.
own flow.
Sure, let me answer that. I think the choice of name is an interesting thing I can get on to later, but more importantly is, I often get this question, why should we worry? We are so great. We are so great, sir. We are 5,000, 20,000 years old, and nobody can touch us. The devas have promised, gurus are for us, and it doesn't matter. I did a recent 45-minute interview one-on-one with Arnab Goswami on Republic TV, and I'm very surprised that after more than half an hour into this, understanding all the details, he was very attentive, listened to me well, he let me speak, okay, which is rare. Normally he won't let you speak, but he let me speak, and after 35 minutes or so, he says, okay, but why should we care if somebody in Harvard, halfway around the world, is ignorant and he's saying all these things, how will it affect us? This is so surprising, we have not learned from history. Lord Macaulay was also an ignorant fellow, sitting halfway around the world in England, and he came up with this idea of dismantling Sanskrit education and replacing it with anglicized education. And today, that's what we have. And we're trying very hard to revive Sanskrit. So that damage is done by one ignorant man halfway around the world. Little bit later, we have Max Miller, who comes up with this Aryan-Dravidian divide. Again, one man, halfway around the world, again very ignorant, he had never gone to India. So he just, using the dictionary, translating from Sanskrit, came up with this whole theory. And today, the entire politics of Tamil Nadu is Dravidian politics. It's a very difficult thing to get rid of that Dravidianism from the identity of the people. So that's an example number 2. We have not learned from history. Example number 3 is Lord Risley developed the caste system. There was Varna, there was Jati, there was sometimes hierarchy, but the hierarchy would be toppled. People who were supposedly below we had the Shudra dynasty, and all these kind of things happening, but he decided to freeze it and call it that this is from the Vedic times, a frozen fixed structure. And he started doing these censuses every 10 years with this idea of a hierarchical caste, and so that got fixed. And today we are living with all these caste problems. So I'm giving you 3 examples, I can give you many examples. So let's not forget history. Let's not go on saying how will it affect us, we are so great, sir. I could give you many more examples where this arrogance on our part, superiority complex on our part, complacency on our part has actually helped harm us immensely. And we better, every time somebody tells you, some guy tells you why should it affect you, you give them these examples and say that you're basically lazy, this is a lazy attitude. We have itne great hands, nothing will happen to us. But that's not true. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a small incidental comment and a question to follow. Historically, the Catholic Church was dismantled by Henry VIII after Reformation movement, and after Russian Revolution, Lenin dismantled the religious institutions in Russia. So the examples are there in history about dismantling religious institutions. The question pertains to one man influencing globally, and that relates to a Harvard graduate, Steve Bannon, whose global populist movement is going on currently, and I'd like your opinion on that.
Okay, so the second one, I'm not an expert on Steve Bannon. I don't want to talk about this left-wing, right-wing American politics. I want to talk about where I'm an expert. Now, the first example you gave is more relevant. The church in one example was dismantled, the church in another example was dismantled, but Christianity and the church in general is still very strong. One of the strongest institutions in the world today is Christianity and the church. So dismantling was temporary, dismantling was localized. The Russian church is back, it's very strong. So yes, you can argue that in a certain part of history, a certain localized area, some church got dismantled, and some mosque got dismantled. But the point is that neither Christianity nor Islam have ever been colonized by a foreign entity over 1,000 years like we have. Maybe in one locality they got colonized for 100 years, 200 years, Maybe in some other part of the world they were very strong. It was not that their center, the center of Islam got colonized for a long time, never happened. And it was never that the center of Christianity overall got dismantled, never happened. So you have to look at nuance, you have to look at the duration and the extent of dismantling that they suffered, okay, which is very minor compared to what we have suffered. The extent and the duration of the foreign domination and alien hostile domination that they suffered, which was very mild compared to what we suffered. And you have to also look at the fact that they, after a while, they came back. So in our case, India is the only major civilization in the world which was dominated by people from, in the first instance, people from the Middle East for hundreds of years who imposed, Persian as a language, and then people from Europe for another few centuries who imposed English as a language, and this continuity of colonization for 1,000 years is a unique experience of any major civilization that is still surviving, and we are still surviving. So I think there is something different about us, and we have to celebrate that there is something strong that we can revive and regenerate, and not get complacent that that this would be okay for us. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Malhotra, thank you so much for your nice talk. I was amazed by one word that you said: India is on the crosshair of all these people who are trying to work against it. My question is, what is the basic reason that India is on the crosshair? What are these entities?
Okay, so let me just elaborate, because I have 3 minutes and Balram is here. Otherwise, he has to get me a private jet. So I have to.
Thank you.
Yeah. So India is in the crosshair because of the reason I just gave. It's the only large civilization that survived in spite of every attempt to get rid of it. And its resilience, it has a resilience. But now they're going after the elite, not just the grassroots, the poor people. They're going after the elite, raising the next generation of rich people's kids in this wokeism way, infiltrating the corporate structures, infiltrating the university structures, infiltrating the government. So I see this being far more serious this time, but the battle has been going on for a long time. I have to take your leave, but I wish we had started earlier and continued for 2-3 hours, and I would love to come back maybe when it's warm again in April, May, June. I used to come here all the time, and now we need to get, let me know in advance next year, and we can spend a half day, do a workshop and get more people involved. And thank you very much for including me.
Thank you, Rajiv. Rajiv has been a great supporter of the Center for Indic Studies right from the very beginning, and I'm so pleased that he continues. He is an example that we all could, especially young people. He is a professional. He was in AI business, and he made a lot of money, of course. So you can make a lot of money, but then he's also doing a service for the society. India is a very unique country. It's very difficult to understand, but I tell you one thing: all the world wars did not start in India. They all started in Europe. So they have real problem. You do have real solution. We have all kind of languages, and their scripts are different, but we still don't fight wars. So there is something for the world to understand. And only India's community in India, and also particularly those of us who come out. I think this is very important that you bring, and you understand, first of all, you understand, like Rajiv is I say he's a listening post. He always blows the horn when there is something wrong. So he is one of those people who bigs us all up and see something that we otherwise don't. He's a very successful businessman, and so there is, when he talks from experience. He's not an academic person like us. We read books. He writes books so that we can read. And so it's very important that you, Rajiv, came and said thank you very much for offering that you will come here and have a workshop. I think that would be a wonderful idea. And thank you so much. Thank you all for joining today. And yeah, it is a rush. I do have your jet here already, but we'll go on the road. It's waiting for you. And thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chale. Yeah, he's ready.
Thanks.